Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Imperium the Contention from Contention Games. Imperium the Contention is a 4X style game. I don't know if it's officially 4X, but it's a 4X style card game in which you're going to be colonizing this galaxy, wandering around with your specific races over here, your specific factions, trying to play your cards to the board, cards that will be ships, cards that will have abilities, cards that will increase and improve upon your own personal engine as you vie to be the first player to get 8 victory points in this game. The game is basically going to involve your hand of cards, every single faction over here, and again, there's 6 different factions in the game. I currently have it set up for a 3-player game. You can start the game by drawing 4 cards. There are some mulligan rules you'll have access to as far as making sure you have a better, more ideal hand, but from there your cards represent anything. Your cards over here, we have some ships over here. So you have a ship, the second invader over here, which has a, attack of 3, a defensive 3, and a movement of 1, and then they have their own keywords and abilities on them, and it'll cost you 4 to play. Because the core structure in this game is you're relying on your cards to do most of the things for you. How you manage this game is going to involve how you spread around the galaxy, how you ensure you draw as many cards as possible, how you get your resource engine up and running, and how you try to take advantage of all these things in combination to ultimately acquire 8 points, points which you generally get by taking down opponents' colonies or homeworlds or things like that. The core structure of the game is going to involve, at the beginning of your turn, you're going to get resources equal to the number of planets you control plus 1, which means your first turn, you're going to control that initial 1 area, so you're going to have 1 resource. As you slowly explore the galaxy and get more areas on board, putting your own tokens on them to mark ownership, right now I'd go ahead and get 3 resources because of that. You're also going to draw a card as well, because those cards over here, these are going to be incredibly helpful being added to your hand to give you more and more tools and options at your disposal at the various things they can do. The cards are the core of the game. They are a lot of fun. This is a card-based 4X system. From there, you're going to take in your turn, which involves basically you're going to go ahead and do any movement from any ships on the board. So if you have any ships on the board, you're going to go ahead and have the opportunity to move them around the board. When you move the ship, it may first jump to any friendly location. So for example, if the ship is over here, it can start by jumping over here, and then from there it can move 2 across the world, going ahead and turning over the various spots and trying to figure out exactly what new spot was explored and how you want to engage that spot. From there, you also have a develop action, and this is going to all be in turn order using the scepter. You're going to move all your ships as far as you want. You're going to go ahead and take a one, I should call it a hammer action or whatnot. You have a single core action you can take, and those actions are either going to be settling, which is a very common way to do it, where you settle a location, or alternatively, there'll be various options over here. This mutual veld over here lets you gain an extra resource. Your home world over here, a friendly ship may jump up to 2 sectors and draw a card. So you're going to have these core actions you can take 1 of, and again, they're often settle or the specific location actions, and so you're going to go through that phase player by player, passing the scepter around, at which point you're going to start playing cards. Playing cards involves paying the resources on those cards, the little number in the corner over there, and you're going to do so one at a time using your bluff card that players are going to have access to kind of determine when you're going and when you're stopping. So for example, in the game, you'll have all players saying, I'm going to go ahead and play a card, and then you turn it over, and either it is another card, and you're continuing the cycle, or you are bluffing, and you're done for the round. At which point, all players who are still playing cards continue, and I play a card, and this time I'm bluffing, and now I'm done. So you're going to go through the cycle of everyone playing cards one at a time, having their bluff card as access to them, so that they can go ahead and not really let people know when they're done playing various cards that'll affect the game state in different ways. When you're done with all of that, you're then going to go ahead and take the battle phase. The battle phase is where you can go ahead and either attack the opponent's home rules or locations they're on, comparing the strength of a location to the strength of your ship and taking over those areas, or alternatively, fighting the actual ships or locations or bases that are in play around there. You'll also have the Imperial Capital over here, but you can't settle this location until you have at least 5 strength, but once you do so, you have the opportunity to settle this location, which at the beginning of your turn will gain you 2 favor, contributing to the 8 favor you need to win the game. So holding on to the capital ensures that there's a lot of favor constantly being accumulated and trading hands, as you often in the game, the way the game cycle works is whenever you take over a location, you'll gain favor. Whenever you take over an opponent's location, you'll gain favor. But whenever your location is taken from you, you will lose favor. So there is an ebb and flow to flavor, but there's to favor, not flavor. There's an ebb and flow to favor, but the amount of favor you gain is always more than what you lose, meaning that the favor is always going up in this game. And that's basically the core cycle. On your turn, you get resources equal to the number of locations you control plus 1. Then you can go ahead and have the opportunity to You then go ahead and draw a card as well. From there you go to a movement phase and a colonizing phase or core action phase as you pass the scepter around. From there you play cards, and that is the core engine of what's happening in Imperium the Contention. Past that, there's also a solo mode, as well as a whole bunch of deck building. The solo mode, let's actually cover the deck building aspect. Every faction is going to come with its own little deck box, where you're going to have a deck box. You're going to have a pre-built deck that has a good selection of cards that will work together for your faction, combining your faction ability, combining the various cards, and giving you that core flavor. Each faction does have its own flavor as far as what they're good at, what they specialize in, whether it's more movement, more stealth, more production, things like that. And then past that, there's also a degree of deck building. There's going to be a giant stack of cards over here. This giant stack of cards gives you the opportunity to build decks in a variety of ways, ways, trying to figure out how you want to adjust your own core deck using the cards at play, trying to figure out what you want to mix, what specialties do you want to make as far as your faction engine is constructed. So you have the opportunity to use the preset decks or build your decks as necessary. And then when you're done with all that, there also is a solo mode. There's a full solo mode over here. The back of the rulebook gives you a bunch of scenarios to go through. It's a choose your own adventure scenario mode where you're going to start with a faction, you're going to start making choices, you're going to involve yourself with different encounters with different cards, and these cards have a little bit of an engine as far as how they're going to put down ships and settle and move and do all these things. And it's your job to try to build a better, faster engine that can take down what the AI is throwing at you faster than the AI throws it at you, with the goal obviously be of winning the scenario and continuing your progression along the choose your own adventure story. And that is Imperium the Contention, which brings us to review, starting off with ease of play. The rulebook is very short and accessible. If you look at the rulebook, you'll see over here that it has a bunch of setup stuff, and it has a bunch of the maps over here, and it has a bunch of ending stuff as well that's unnecessary. The actual rules over here are like 3 or 4 pages in the middle. It's very, very short on rules and very easy to dive into. The only downside is, I would say that while it is only 3 or 4 pages, it wasn't necessarily the clearest 3 or 4 pages. I feel it could have used maybe an example or 2 more, or perhaps a bit more fleshing out. It is easy to understand, and there's not a lot of text going on, but perhaps another page of examples or clarification would have been helpful. Past that, the game time does vary depending on the player count, and it depends on the experience with the game as well. You can have a game that is as short as an hour if you're playing with, or maybe even less than an hour if you're really charging through it with people who know what's going on, but it also can drag, especially if you're playing at a higher player count for the first time. There'll be a lot as people pick up that flow. The flow is pretty simple, but it's not intuitive in the sense that it's neither simultaneous everyone doing things at the same time, nor is it I take my turn, you take your turn. It's phases, and some of those phases are simultaneous, and some of those phases involve a turn structure, so picking that up takes a round or 2, but once you do have that, it's pretty quick. Generate resources, draw a card, move your ships, take a single action, play cards, rinse, repeat the battle, then rinse and repeat the cycle. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, I don't know if this game officially brands itself as a 4X game, but it does feel like a 4X game in terms of what it's doing. You have that sense of exploration, you have that sense of taking others out, you have the sense of building up your engine and gathering more cards and researching to a degree. It has that feel of a 4X exploration game as far as what the game is doing, and it has most of those mechanics fairly well, while giving you that sense of just trying to take over everything, trying to explore the galaxy, trying to gather more and more cards in different ways that will help you as you go through this over here. And it gives you all that with a ton of card variety and deck building options. You have those 6 factions, each with their own custom deck, and you have the ability to adjust and craft your deck, building out the deck the way that you want it, building out towards your core specialty. You might have an affinity towards the faction that generates more resources, the Meccan over there, they generate more resources, have a little bit more card economy, things like that, but you may still want to customize it even further to your specific aspects of what you like in that deck. You can't control what you draw, but you can control for the fact that there will be a mulligan, and you will be drawing more cards throughout the course of the game, and so building a deck around your playstyle adds even further to what this game allows you to do and feel cool while doing it, which is a huge part of it. The cards ultimately mostly feel cool. It mostly feels like you always have some cool trick up your sleeve. The only problem is the players on the other end of the table also have a cool trick up your sleeve. This is a game that has everyone feeling good about what they're doing. Everyone feels powerful. Everyone feels like their card, like, I'm now generating an extra resource over here, and then now suddenly I stopped your ship from moving by planting that little stealth thing over here, and you can't move your ship at all, and you can't attack my ship, and you can't target mine, and I now have this thing that will just go ahead and destroy 2 value ships across the galaxy. Everyone has something cool going on. The faction variety, the card variety, and then of course the hand management and card economy of the game. Trying to figure out whether you need another settle action, which will give you access to a location. It'll also get another token down, which will help you to slowly spread across the galaxy. It'll also help you with the fact that you're going to generate more resources every turn. That's all very, very cool. But maybe instead you wanted to go ahead and take that action that's going to give you an extra 2 card draws because you're running low on cards, and having a few extra cards might help you actually get the tools you need at your disposal. So there is a solid mechanical engine at play here that really rewards you, and that's before we even get into the fact that there is a solo puzzle that is also engaging in its own right. The solo puzzle has you facing off against a AI that has a degree of randomness but a degree of predictability to it. The way the AI card decks are structured is, as you go through them, you're going to be a little bit surprised by what the AI is doing, but then start to fall into a pattern of what the AI is going to be continuing to execute in every single round. And if you can get your engine up and running before they do, and it is a big if because the AI can be competitive, well, that gives you a very different puzzle. The same mechanical tools at play, but a very different puzzle as far as how you experience against that mechanical tool. Rather than another player who's constantly throwing cool new things at you, even as you throw cool new things at them, you have a more predictable procedural opponent that you're slowly dealing with. As far as what I don't like in the game, The biggest thing is that it's just harder for me personally to get behind a table full of cards and stats, especially when you're dealing with the physical aspect of different viewpoints around the table. This is more of a preferential thing in the sense that I typically have not loved games that have you have all your cards, your people, your opponents, and all that stuff down on a table as the various cards you're dealing with. The game will become populated with more and more cards, and so you're not really looking at figures on the board, you're not looking at standees, you're looking at a whole bunch of stats that are spread across the board and trying to make sense of what's happening over here, which is absolutely doable, but it's a lot, especially when you're looking at it from the upside down perspective, which will happen. I've played this game on TTS as well as in person. Playing on TTS weirdly is one of those times where it's a little bit easier because I can look at the cards from my perspective no matter which seat at the table I have, versus playing it in person, unless you're the person facing this way, looking at 7 cards on the table from the left, the right, or upside down is just a lot of information to manage, and I like the overall system here. We'll get more into this in final thoughts, but at the end of the day, this is a game where you're going to have a lot of cards representing a lot of different units with a lot of information all present on a table, which almost makes the solo experience more enjoyable for me, with the caveat that I like as far as the gameplay itself, I like facing off against human opponents more than solo opponents, especially in this game. I find the solo opponent is more procedural and more mechanical, and I like the chaos of having you throw your cool stuff at me. The downside of it is that unless I'm sitting on this seat, it's just a lot of information, and it's harder to get behind feeling as invested as I would like to be. As far as I can see others not liking, first of all, there are bad starting hands. Now, there is a mulligan rule to take account for that, but if you don't have the right cards, and if you don't mulligan into the right cards, then yes, you might find yourself having a harder time getting your engine up and running. This game, I find, is the most tight in the beginning rounds. While you're trying to find the right card draws, while you're trying to get stuff up and putting down upgrades and gathering more ships, I find the beginning of the game is where things are often tightest, and a bad hand there can totally mess you up. Again, you can mulligan into it, and usually it's not going to be a problem because of that, but it could be a factor there. Past that, I just think at the end of the day, I guess more what I said already as far as what I don't like, which is just the nature of it's a very well done game with a whole lot of stats that you have to manage. As far as final thoughts on Imperium the Contention, I found myself very torn on what to rate this one. I really like this game. I do. But I also think it's a game that won't stay in my collection because of that main thing I don't like. I think Imperium the Contention is excellent. And also, if you look at Board Game Geek ratings in this, I believe it's rated an 8.1 on Board Game Geek or something. People like this game, and I agree with them. I think it's excellent. Every single time I play this game, I feel that sense of reward as I try a new faction. I've only lightly experimented with the deck building aspects of the game, and that even further added to my enjoyment of feeling a sense of ownership over faction. I personally have an affinity towards the Mechan. I like that extra resource engine. I like in general games that give me more resources to control and more stuff to manage. I like driving my pathway forward that way. And I like the Mechan faction. I like experimenting and playing around with them. They're the faction I dove into it solo as well. And I get that sense of ownership over it. And I haven't even played as some of the factions. I've played as 3 or 4 of the factions. I've not tried all of them yet. And they all give you a different sense of how their cards run, how their deck works, what they get to throw at the opponent. And it's all very well done. It is very well done. I just wish it weren't a bundle of information on the table with a whole bunch of cards that kind of make it so that the core engine of what's happening here, I think is excellent, but I also find that I'm not as in love with how it ends up presenting on the table, if that makes sense. For me, I'm going to rate this one a 3.5 out of 5. I really like it. I heavily debated whether to call it a 4 out of 5. I did. I'm very torn. I think the gameplay is excellent. I do. I really think it's excellent. It's a very, very solid game. I just think that at the end of the day, most games in this genre, if you're looking at other games like this, in fact, speaking of which, let's go ahead and move to recommendations. If you like this game, or if you're looking for other games that you might like, that might be a good indicator of whether you'll like this game, I recommend Summon Wars. Summon Wars from Plaid Hat Games, fantastic game with all your cards on the table, managing your entire faction of taking down the enemy with stuff on the table, and similarly, Arakan Wars. Both of those are going to be very much table-driven card games where you're moving things around, trying to navigate around the board, and manage a card-based combat system that has a ton of information and a whole lot of intricacy to them. And going back to my final thoughts aspect, that's what I mean as well. Both those games, all these games are games that I think are fantastic in what they do, but I found that personally, I find myself a little bit harder pulled into them because I don't love tables full of cards representing a miniature-esque army, if that makes sense. In any case, until next time, hope you found this video helpful. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.